Welcome back, class. I think we're gonna finish it up with this third segment. I think the third segment will pretty much finish us up. And one thing that you hear a lot of people ask, at least I hear students ask, is, how do you know when to change your organizational structure? And one way that executives determine how to change that organizational structure is what the authors talk about, creating organizational control systems. It allows executives to track how well the organization is performing, identify areas of concern, and then take action to address the concerns. It creates the appropriate organizational structure and effectively executes the organizational strategy. So you're talking about putting control structures in place to help executives determine whether the organizational structure that they have is driving the level of profitability they want. And not only is the executives asking that, but the board of directors and the shareholders are going to be asking the same thing. There's three basic types of control systems. Make sure I've got them here. And when you're talking about control systems, you've got output controls. So that's the first one that the authors talk about. And it's a focus on measurable results within an organization. Most organizations, when you're talking about measurable results, it goes back to the old micro approach of average product of labor, marginal product of labor, how many units can be generated by an FTE. Executives must decide when they're trying to focus on these measurable results, they have to determine, is the level of performance acceptable? Have they communicated the metrics, whatever metrics they decide, to the employees? How do they track performance to determine if expectations are met? And do they need to make any changes? And at Blue Cross Blue Shield, I managed, I'll just take as I go back to the clinicians, I managed some nurses, and one of the metrics we had for the nurses is, dollars that they identified that had been paid incorrectly to hospitals. One of the other metrics was how many medical charts could they review on a monthly basis? How many cases could they close on a monthly basis? Again, looking at units or looking at something measurable for FTE. And when it came to managing the performance and making sure everybody was on track, had the goals I had set up were black and white. I had a meets, an exceeds, and a stretch goal. And you either hit those goals, and you either hit them or you didn't, because they were definitive goals. They were black and white. You kind of consider them binary goals. Either yes, I hit them, or no, I didn't hit them. And because of that, it works really well when it comes to a quality or an output control. May require a corrective action plan, and unfortunately, and you'll hear people talk about a CAP, corrective action plan, CAP, and I've had to initiate several of those along the way. Government contracts, you have, I guess I don't want to call them corrective action plans, but you have predetermined metrics. You see them in a lot of government contracts, vendor contracts. If you're ever working for an organization that, buying and selling, suppliers, buyers contracts, you've got metrics of performance built into those. Value chain, supply chain contracts are always going to be some type of metrics built into those for performance. And if the individuals don't meet those performance, then you have to develop a corrective action plan and give them the opportunity to turn things around. Think about your college experience. It's driven by output control measures. A lot of universities, if you don't have a certain GPA, they're going to ask you to go spend your time doing something else. In the PhD program at Ohio State, if you didn't maintain a 3.3 GPA average, they ask you to leave the the PhD programs. And again, you're talking about output controls. You know, think about your GPA. You start as a freshman that first semester, and your GPA is 0.0 probably, unless you got some kind of a credits you may have transferred in or something some way. After the first semester, you made it through that first semester, you've got a GPA of like 3. So that's fall semester. Let's say in the spring semester, you have a GPA that's 3.5, then at the end of that spring semester, your overall GPA is going to be something greater than 3 because your marginal has been greater than your average. And that's the way that the output control goes for a college student. The second type of control is a behavior control, a focus on specifying the actions that ultimately lead to results. To me, it's behavior control is a little harder to quantify, but you've got rules, policies, and procedures are used to standardize or dictate behavior. Think about restrooms. You go into a restroom in a restaurant and there's a big sign on the wall that says, wash your hands before you go back to work. There are dress codes, employee theft, ordering supplies, signing checks. You've got word choices. You've got this woke environment that's driving everything. I can remember our son went to a private high school in Southern California, went to the Bishop School, and they had a dress code. Dress code was for all the students, male and female. When I worked at HealthNet in Southern California, a lot of in that Southern California, that regional office, a lot of the employees we got were kids just right out of college. And, they would, first, they didn't know how to interview. They didn't know how to dress for an interview. And a lot of them would show up in the first week or so at work, and they thought they were just like they were going to class, I guess, at San Diego State, because they'd come in and they'd be wearing wrinkled pants and shirts looked like they'd slept in it. And what part of orientation week, what HealthNet started doing is they had an arrangement with Nordstrom, the big department store in Southern California. Well, they're all over the United States, but in Southern California, it was huge. And they would do a fashion show. They would load everybody up, bus them over to Nordstrom, and they would sit down, and the models would come out and say, "Here is appropriate attire for the dress code." And then they would come out with skirts that were too short, and t-shirts with all kinds of writing on them, and said, "This is what you better not wear when you come to work." And it was part of the orientation week, and it worked extremely well when it came to this new hire orientation, because these kids, they went from looking like bums when they came to work to dressing professional. And in the office in Southern California, it was corporate casual. You didn't have to wear a coat and tie. Females didn't always have to wear it was business casual, corporate/business casual. And that's what these models showed these new hires through the new hire orientation, and it worked extremely well for getting everybody on board. But that's where you're talking about this behavioral control. College students and class attendance. Professors, if you're talking about class attendance, then the textbook also says you expect professors to update their lecture notes every 5 years just to keep up with what's going on. I think that's a good policy too, but class attendance at some universities is extremely important. Class participation is extremely important. Creating and rewarding acceptable behavior. You want to align awards with acceptable behavior, efficiency, and profits. So we talked about kind of output control. We've talked about behavioral control. Now we're going to talk about clan control. Clan control is relying on shared traditions, expectations, values, and norms to lead people to work toward the good of their organization. You see this a lot in not-for-profit organizations. You have some of the more experienced workers that mentor and try to move the new individuals forward, or the new employees forward, along the lines of what the expectations are going to be. It's some kind of an informal type control, but it's effective in settings where, especially where creativity is vital. A research scientist, if you're a research scientist, clan control works extremely well because creativity is extremely vital. Um, one of the I guess companies that you typically think about is Google. You see all of these pictures of work environment at Google. Google relies on effective clan control to be one of the more creative technology companies. Even though they've had issues with bias in AI, I still think that when it comes to it, Google, when it comes to clan control, they do an extremely good job with clan control. They talk about in the text about the state of Florida, DMV. Can they use clan control to increase performance? Think about your college, and again, I keep coming back to some of this college experience, but think about your college experience. Think about your social organizations. I was an AGR, Alpha Gamma Rho. I was in a fraternity as an undergraduate, and we focused on, grade point average. We focused on community service, especially blood drives and things like that. Students want to belong to something special, especially during Greek week. It was Greek week extremely intense, but it was something that everybody that was in the Greek system, fraternity or sorority, everybody felt it special and belonged in it, and it helped a lot of us to end up with a grade point average and build our work ethic in such a way that it moved us forward. And once we got out of college, then the authors get into something. They talk about management fads that are out of control, and I've been involved in a lot of these management fads, and trust me, they are out of control. And to me, they've long past lived their efficiency. The first one was management by objective, process where managers and employees work together to create goals. That one's okay because it does do a good job. It's not, but at the end of the day, you have to understand that you as the manager have the final say. It's okay to gather input from your subordinates, but at the end of the day, you have final say on what that goal is. Goals drive employees' behavior and evaluate their performance. Difficult to assign objective goals to all activities within a functional area, and it is to some extent difficult to assign objective goals to every activity in a functional area, but at the same time, you want as many of your metrics assigned as objective goals as possible. And that's where we get into objective and subjective. When I first got to Blue Cross Blue Shield, one of the goals that one of my functional areas had was we want to improve customer experience. What do you mean improve? Sure, you want to improve customer experience, but how are you going to measure it? So you have to have objectionable goals. You have to have objective goals. You have the second one, and while management by objective, I remember when it kind of went through the process, and there are some aspects of it that are okay. You want input, but remember, you as a manager have the final say. And then there was a second one, these quality circles. Quality circles, that's a formal group of employees who meet regularly to brainstorm solutions to organizational problems. Identify behaviors to improve the quality of products and the operations management process. And the quality circles had their, I guess, their day in the sun. Unfortunately, there is no perfect quality product out there. If there is, or at least there is, I haven't found that product that has perfect quality. But, it's almost like these, I think with these quality circles, the ones that I've been involved in, you not only brainstorming as a group, but there were suggestion boxes scattered around the companies. You'd bring these suggestion boxes, suggestion boxes into the quality circle, and you'd kind of work through them. And when you get in these quality circles, they have to remember that the four critical dimensions of the production process is quality, speed, cost, and flexibility. So quality is just one of the four. And maximizing any one often produces goods and services that don't satisfy the customer needs. So you have to worry about trade-offs. Are they inevitable? So all the companies I've worked in that were concerned about quality, you tried to optimize quality, but you didn't optimize it in such a way that you gave up speed, cost, and efficiency. All four of those had to work together. They all four had to be joined at the hip. One of my favorites, as far as being out of date, is sensitivity training groups. I never heard them called T groups before, but at least that's what the authors called them, referred to them as T groups. And it's groups of people who meet to discuss emotions, feelings, beliefs, and biases about workplace issues to gain greater understanding of themselves and others. And I've been in sensitivity trainings on a lot of companies. It was just required. Everybody, once a year, you went through sensitivity trainings. Some companies handled it, then they were actually positive. And then I've been in sensitivity training classes at other companies that it was a train wreck. You're supposed to have free-flowing conversations led by a facilitator, but unfortunately, a lot of times facilitator couldn't control the group. Things got out of hand. More enlightened workers and a greater spirit of teamwork. That was the goal. Research indicates that groups can be far crueler than individuals, and accusations and humiliation usually is the end result. And then number 4 is organizational culture. Values and norms embraced by an organization that determine how people interact with other organizational members as well as external stakeholders. Organizational culture, you're trying to put it in place because you're trying to actually drive the plan control issue. You're trying to improve plan control, and that's where you're trying to put that organizational culture in place. Remember, mission, vision, and culture. Culture is extremely important, and organizational culture is going to help to drive that plan control. And then somewhere along the way, the wheels just started falling off this organizational culture. I still think organizational culture is extremely important, but plan control elements and the organizational culture can't outpace accountability and the ability to accept responsibility. So I think all 4 of these have they've had their day in the sun, and I think it's time to move on to something else. Well, empowerment, good to great, and visual marketing become fads also. So they threw out some other fads there. Executives will see some performance improvement. Management fads they do have a core of truth. And their core of truth is sometimes you need a hybrid approach to managing output control, behavior control, and plan control. And most successful organizations over time have found that some type of hybrid culture or some type of hybrid approach does a much better job in not only developing, controlling, and focusing output control, behavior control, and plan control. We're going to talk just a couple of minutes about legal forms of business. First one is sole proprietorship, a company owned by one person. We talked about sole proprietorship a few minutes ago. All profits are the property of the owner. All losses and debts, unfortunately, are the responsibility of the owner. Lawsuits, liability issues could lead to forfeiture of personal assets. You think about sole proprietorships, entrepreneurs, inventors, a lot of sole proprietor, plumbers, electricians, handyman, yard service, landscape. Second legal form of business is a partnership. A legal form of business where two or more partners share ownership in a company. Partners sharing profits, losses, debts, and liabilities. Each partner's expertise complements the others. Financial and operational risk, if any, one partner makes a bad decision. And so when you're talking about partnership and sole proprietorship, you're being taxed. The profits are going to be taxed as personal income. You think of partnerships as doctors, accountants, tax preparation, those kinds of partnerships. And then we've got corporations. See if they broke it down. You've got corporations. First, we're going to talk about is a C Corp. A legal form of ownership where shares of ownership are publicly traded in stock markets and management is performed by professional executives. Maybe you'll hear it called a C corporation or a C Corp. Profits and losses impact the shareholders. Stock prices rise and fall. Cash dividends. So if you make a profit, the board of directors of the corporation can either decide to pass it on to the shareholders as a cash dividend, or they can decide to keep some as retained earnings. One thing that you run into with the C Corp, it's what they call double dip. It's double taxation. The corporation is taxed, and then you have profits resulting after the corporation is taxed, and those profits, if they're passed on as dividends, are going to be taxed at the personal level of income at the shareholder. So you've got double taxation there. And that's why they say corporate profits and dividends are both taxed. Corporate profits at the corporate rate, dividends at the personal rate. Capital gains tax on profits made via stock sale are also taxed. So if you invest in a C Corp, there are multiple venues that you could get taxed. Then you have an S corporation. It's a special type of corporation where the company's profits and losses are reported on owners' personal tax returns in proportion with each owner's share of the company. Now, in an S Corp, you can only have 100 or less shareholders in the corporation. So it's a much smaller corporation. And in that situation, the profits and losses are taxed at the personal tax level of the shareholders. You think of those as some farms, some small up companies, some small startup companies, real estate, those types of can be an S Corp. And then lastly, you've got a limited liability company, and it's not really a federal recognized it's not really a federal recognized entity or a taxable type of consideration. It's a form of ownership that is granted as state laws wherein owners are not personally responsible for debts that the LLC accumulates. So it's similar to a corporation, S Corp and C Corp, because you're not exposed to the debts and the risk. And the LLC can be run in a flexible manner, similar to a partnership, not recognized by government as a form of business. When it says government, by federal government as a form of business, must choose to be taxed as a corporation, a partnership, or a sole proprietorship. And most of them that I've dealt with on limited liability are choose to be taxed as a partnership or sole proprietorship, but they don't want to be taxed as a corporation because they don't want to be double taxed. So you've got sole proprietorship, you've got partnership, and you've got LLC are going to be taxed at the personal tax level. You've got a C Corp and an S Corp are going to be taxed at, actually the C Corp is double taxed, the S Corp is not. So it gets a little tricky, and depending on what the corporation is that you work for, you'll need to have an understanding of how they are recognized and defined as they move forward. And at this point, we're going to, I guess that's going to wrap us up on chapter 9. And the next time we get together, we'll talk about chapter 10. Talk to you then. Bye-bye.